Well, there are still some things to be decided, but I think I can say safely, game on. Welcome back to Tim and Sid. Tim McAuliffe, Sid Cicero, Commissioner Gary Bettman of the National Hockey League has been kind enough to join us after walking us through the system that's in place so far here. We got a ton of questions, Gary. Thank you very much for joining us. First off, you did mention the return to play committee. You mentioned the players involved, just the process. I just want to let it breathe for a second. What was it like working with them to get to this point?
Well, obviously, it's great to be with you, and there's light at the end of the tunnel, which is great for everybody. Not our first experience in dealing with players directly in the Players Association, but this was extraordinarily collaborative. The cooperation was great, the communication was great, and we had a regular series of conference calls by phone. And for us, while we had an idea of how we thought it was important to come back, we knew that health and safety had to be of paramount importance, and we made that clear to the players up front. And from a health standpoint, there was two aspects. One, COVID-19, obviously, and two, with the players being off for a while, we don't want anybody on the ice who wasn't game ready. We weren't going to rush anything. And we needed to hear from the players what was important to them. Being away from home for not too long a period of time, making sure they're in game shape. There was concern about history and tradition and the integrity of winning the cup as anybody else. So it was really understanding what was important and needed, made it a terrific process. And there are a couple of those open issues that we still have. But in terms of those issues, we really want to be guided by what the players ultimately decide.
You know, Gary, we were talking earlier about the MLBPA and the negotiations that they're currently having with Major League Baseball. We've talked a lot about the NBA and their Players Association. What did it mean to you on Friday to have the players vote 29-2? Does that speak to the collaboration that you have had from the Players Union?
Well, it really was more a recognition that this was something that was, shall we say, joint problem solving. We both have a continuity of interest. Everybody involved in the process loves the game. We and the players are hearing from our fans overwhelmingly they'd like to see us complete the season. So we were coming at it a little bit differently at the beginning, but the fact is we were on a joint mission because we all want the same result, and that ultimately is about love for the game.
NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman here on Tim and Sid. Gary, in terms of hub cities, yes. I didn't expect to hear as many names put out as you did today. That was new. When do you need to finalize this? And what needs to be in place for one of these cities to get the responsibility?
Great question. And let me go back to where I started. Health and safety, paramount importance. We need to be in a position to be doing lots of testing without doing anything to disrupt medical needs. We need to be doing an unbelievable amount of testing, but not to disrupt medical needs. We want to be in a place that doesn't have a lot of COVID-19. And we also have governmental issues we have to deal with as to whether or not when we move everybody to a hub city, whether or not there are going to be government requirements that we can't live with, like a quarantine for 2 weeks. So we want to make sure to have lots of options. I suppose you could say we're going to this one or this two cities, but we don't know what the world's going to look like in 3 weeks. So when we make that decision, we want the best available information. And we believe all of the cities that have been named, and there may be another couple that drop in the mix or somebody could drop out. We want to be in a position to make the best decision at the time and not lock ourselves into a place where maybe it won't look so good in 3-4 weeks as we're getting ready to get everybody to convene.
Do you have an idea of when you might get to that decision?
Yeah. Well, the decision I think I'm probably going to have to make in the next 3 to 4 weeks, and that's something that obviously the Players Association is going to want to be comfortable with. But all of the places we're looking at in one fashion or another have the capability to do what we need to have done. I think we're going to open training facilities on a voluntary basis the first week of June. The guys are going to come back. And this whole program is going to evolve. The guys are going to let us know how they feel. They're going to work out. They're going to get back into shape. And then we're going to get an indication of how much more time they want before training camp, how much time they want for training camp. It would be one thing. And one of the meetings we had with the Return to Play committee was players said, okay, we think we need a 4-week training camp. I said, what's going to happen if 3 days in, your teammates are losing their minds that they have to do this for another 27 days? So
Right.
We're going to need to reason on that together. We'll be playing, if all this comes together as we expect it will, over the summer and probably into the early fall. And we're good with that, because if we have to start next season later, that's going to be okay too. And we anticipate next season will be a full regular season with everything we normally do.
How late is too late, Gary, on the start of next season? Like, how
And,
far can you go?
We can go far. I'm not going to give you a hard and fast date, but we don't have to start in October. We could start in November. We could start in December. Could we start with the Winter Classic? I mean, anything's possible. But what we're learning from this experience is, because of how good our buildings are, and ice making isn't like it was 75 or 100 years ago, we don't need to necessarily be locked into the other schedule. There's a new normal out there in this world, and we have to be adaptable, which is the way we've approached this process.
Tim, Sid, and Gary all working from home on this
Yes.
special edition of Tim and Sid on Sportsnet 360, and across the Sportsnet radio network. One of the things, and I know that early in the return to play protocol, at least the guidelines that you set out in phase 2 yesterday, it stated that the league recognizes that some players and personnel have family and household members that may fall in the vulnerable category.
Yeah.
What will be done for the player or the personnel who doesn't feel comfortable returning to play at whatever time you set out?
If there is a special requirement, listen, we have players. Some have diabetes, some have asthma. We're going to have to deal with that on a case-by-case basis. We expect players who are able-bodied and don't have those issues to be playing. But if there are special circumstances, we and the club involved, we're going to have to deal with that, and we will. Again, we're finding ourselves in an era where all of us are dealing with things we've never had to deal with before, and so we're doing our homework. We're learning as much as possible about what we have to know, and then we're making the best decisions we can with the information we have.
Gary Bettman, NHL Commissioner here on Tim and Sid. You mentioned homework, Gary, and that encompasses a lot. And part of the discussion Tim and I and other sports talk shows across the country have been having is, how much are commissioners in North America looking at what German soccer just did? We were just running it on Sportsnet. How much are you looking at what the UFC has done over 3 events? How much did that play into you getting to this point today, comfortable enough with your players to make these announcements?
It's another data point. In other words, and all the major leagues in North America, I assume, are going through the same things that we are. Maybe they're not as far along as we are, but they're all going through the same thing. And it's another data point. You have to take it into account. You have to see what is doable. You have to see where there are problems. You have to see maybe what you can do that'll be a little different. I mean, one of the things which is really taking us off the mark a little is, our head of events, Steve Mayer, and content is focusing on, if we're playing as we will likely be without fans, what do we do so that the experience is one that conveys itself well on television? And so the number of things that we've got to check the boxes on, other than simply playing, is off the charts. By the way, are you getting background noise of things?
Just
breaking?
a little.
Maybe.
Nothing will distract me from today's news, Gary. Don't worry about it. Nothing.
That's my 3-year-old grandson playing in the kitchen with his mom in pots and pans. But
The times we live in, Gary, don't worry. I've got 2 upstairs running around right now.
At least the dog's laying quietly at my feet. You've got to look. You've got to know everything. But that's how we generally approach things. And from the moment we caused the pause, we have been focused on what will our options be? How do we learn about things? I went to a school that had social sciences. I didn't like biology and the sciences. I know more about viruses and genetics and testing than I ever wanted to know in my life. But that's all part of what you have to do to make the decisions you need to make.
Gary Bettman joining us here on Tim and Sid. Obviously, economics plays a factor in all this. And if I'm not mistaken, you had 189 games left in the schedule.
Correct.
You are playing presumably in front of empty stadiums. Can this return help mitigate some of the economic losses to the league?
You know, I'm glad you asked that question, because a lot of the commentary, not a lot, some of it, doing it for the money. Relative to the consequence of the coronavirus and relative to how much of the season we had played and how much was left, this is more about the game and people trying to feel a sense of normalcy. Because if what we're doing helps people feel a little more normal again and helps bring us back together, you know, it's one of the things that we think sports does. It brings people together. It helps them heal from difficult times. But the money is not the economic driver here. I mean, yes, the economic consequences of this are terrible, but finishing the season is more about finishing the season than it is about the economics by a long shot.
NHL Commissioner, sorry, Timmy, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, are you worried about the economic future of any of your teams?
Well, no, our teams are the healthiest they've ever been. Our ownership is the best it's ever been. Having said that, you know, having an economic model, which right now we have no revenue coming in, and a large portion, not a majority of our revenues, but a large portion of our revenues come from people in the building. But I'm hopeful that by next season, things will be back to normal and we'll be in a good place. And we'll deal with that as the time comes. But our franchises, our ownership. Now, having said that, you know, our owners, to a man or a woman, are probably not as wealthy as they were 3 months ago, because, you know, when you have as massive unemployment and businesses are shut down, it has a consequence. But I think our clubs have been great with how they've reacted in the community with the players in terms of food banks and donations and the like, and even how our organizations have tried to mitigate the impact on their employees. But, you know, yes, it's not a bottomless pit, but we're doing okay right now. And thank goodness our franchises are as strong as they are.
NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman here on Tim and Sid. Gary, this 24-team format that you formally announced today, 1 year thing, or do you like this?
No, and I've been on record, I like what we had. I think our regular season is incredible. You know, I think we probably have 10 or 11 teams in the hunt down to the last 4 or 5 games of the season. Our competitive balance is extraordinary. Our playoffs is the best in sports. I think what we had and what we have generally is terrific. This is dealing with a unique situation. And we wanted to be fair. There were a number of teams, because of our competitive balance, that were on the bubble when we took the pause. And to just simply say we're taking the top 16, everybody played a different number of games by that point. It was so close. This, in my view, is a one-time thing.
Have you come up with a date when this has to be done by?
No. I mean, we can be fluid. As I said, we're going to evolve. We're going to start phase 2. We'll figure out from phase 2 when it's time for phase 3 and how much phase 3 we need, and then we'll take it from there. So, you know, it's a timeline without specific times. 1 has to go to 2, has to go to 3, has to go to 4. As I said, I think we'll be playing obviously over the summer and probably into the early fall. But the specific dates, at this point, it would be, I think, a little irresponsible to lock in dates when nobody knows exactly what the world's going to look like and how our players are going to feel in 2-3 weeks.
Understood.
Go
Last
ahead.
one from me, Sid. And we believe in context on this show, and we understand that the overall health of society is first and foremost in all of our minds, especially as we discuss hockey. But you've been the commissioner of this league for closing in on decades now. But has this been the toughest job that you've had since taking over in 1993?
Clearly, this is unlike anything that any of us have experienced in our lifetime. Maybe we were a little prepared for this only because, when I mean this, I do have, I put my tongue in my cheek. We do have a little bit of experience in knowing how to operate when we're not operating. But every time we did that, we've come back stronger. Nobody in 04, 05, they were writing us off. We came back to record revenues and record attendance. And I don't know that there's any business that went away for a year that in any industry has come back to do that. So some of the basics in terms of how you deal with your day-to-day environment, how you interact with your business partners, your fans, and the players, some of that was instructional, but nobody's ever seen anything like this. I mean, it's not just us. I mean, you look at the unemployment rates, you look at the level of illness. This is unbelievably horrible for so many people. And yes, you're right. Sports isn't the most important thing, but if it's a pathway that helps bring us all back to some degree of normalcy, then this effort is worth doing.
As I said off the front, Gary, I wasn't a big believer in the term distractions. I just didn't buy it. I buy it now. And I know a lot of hockey fans in this country appreciate you talking directly to them today. I can only imagine the work that you've already done here and the work in front of you, but we really, really appreciate you coming on, Tim and Sid. And all the best going forward, Gary. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I wish you and everybody who listens to you and watches you, let them be safe, let them be healthy, and let's all get through this together.
You're here.
Agreed. Thank you, and all the best to you and the family.
Thank you. You too.